Good morning, guys. My name is Javier Perez III. This is a video I'm recording for my Counseling 6323 Crisis Response and Trauma Care course, where I've been assigned to answer questions about trauma counseling when it comes to natural disasters. So, as we know, this is something that can impact someone dearly because of the loss of life, the loss of property, and the experience of being in a natural disaster that affecting people's lives significantly. So my first question I was asked is, collective trauma is described as a blow to the basic tissues of social life that damage the bonds attaching people together and impairs the prevailing sense of community. What does this mean? To interpret this for a client, this has to be done constructively. What this implies is that people who go through a disaster, it can be challenging because we have damaged, relationships as we lose people in these natural disasters. We also lose property, which can also impact the relationships people have with others. However, to make this constructive, the explanation must be, even though bonds in the communities are damaged, we share a common experience. And we've seen how in psychotherapy, the addition of people who care for one another helps out the individual who is in therapy, because they're going to have individuals who are supporting them and they're not going to feel alone on their own journey. Precisely what we got to keep in mind, guys, is that God always does this to help us be able to become better people. And maybe this is the event He's putting to help us come together in a community. And personally, as a professional, I feel that this is good in therapy as we are identifying the people who are going to be of help to the client. The psychological first aid applies here because we're ensuring a person feels safe, heard, and has a place to stay and feel supported, especially if we have that community. So the second question talks about what kind of impact may the stress of going through a disaster have on a person's well-being. A common theme around this is that there's going to be loss. In the course by Dr. Eberlin that talked about PFA, or psychological first aid, we learned about Gina, who had challenges because she lost a house that has sentimental value, as it was a house that her father constructed from the ground up. Because of this, we've learned that people who have trauma essentially have had to deal with so great of a stressor. This is going to cause them to not have the proper coping skills or coping mechanisms to help them stay positive and help them be able to cope with this. And because this is so sudden, in this case, it's something natural. So the impact that this can have on a person is pretty much, we see a distrust in God. Religion is correlated with mental health well-being in clients. So whenever something like this happens, depending on the interpretation of the event, people may feel that God has abandoned us or that God is punishing us, which we know that God doesn't punish. As we learned, essentially God does all these things to help us be able to become better people and to protect us from things that may not get us closer to salvation. So this could be something He does to help us out. Now, another reaction is the feeling of emptiness, as in Gina's case, because the sentimental value of her parents is gone. So we don't know how to cope with it. We don't know how to move forward with it. So because of this, what are we to do? And this can lead to depression due to the serious loss. And because of the serious loss, we need to ensure that the individual is able to receive proper care. And for me, based on Dr. Eberle's education, for me personally as a professional, that has to be non-judgmental, reflective listening to understand what a client is going through, validate their emotions, and to make sure they receive the non-judgmental support that they yearn for after they've had such great of a loss. And finally, when it comes to the recovery process, these are the stages that are typically described in the video we were assigned this week. So the stages we have first are the pre-disaster stage. So in this one, what happened is we have no concern for the natural disaster. We do see people prepare, and we see commercials that say pack batteries, pack food, have your documents in order. But people may sometimes fall into the idea of thinking, that's not going to happen to me, so I'm not going to worry about it. So thus, we make no preparation, which can increase the risk of a trauma being severe. Which leads us to our next one, disaster. Disaster applies to people who survived this great of a trauma. So for them, disaster has come to them. They don't feel safe and feel that things won't be the same again. In some cases, we see people having near-death experiences. Like, for example, in Hurricane Katrina, people having to be on top of their homes because we saw that the water was basically leveling their home and it was above windows. Some houses were one story, so it was something challenging for them at the time. The next part we have is the heroic phase. The heroic phase focuses on helping individuals and providing support during the current challenges we have in our community. Well, this focuses on coming together as a community, which, if we learn from point number 1, a natural disaster causes us to have those broken bonds. But here we're repairing them and we're coming together as a community. And this will be more apparent when we come to the honeymoon stage. We have a feeling that everything is going to be all right and we're going to receive support from God. We've had a big impact on our life because of the storm, but all in all, everything is going to work out and we are going to recover. And we see this change especially because in a storm or in a natural disaster, we see separation from our loved ones. We see separation from our possessions. But when we start getting it back, if you have that blessing, we start seeing, recovery. In the honeymoon phase, we got to make sure that counseling begins, especially with the next step that's coming forward. We have this positivity. We have this reunion with our families. We have essentially a sense of community again. But in our next phase, which is the disillusionment phase, this is where things do a 180 turn. And this is because people eventually begin realizing that, well, we're community united, but we still have people lost. We still have our houses leveled. When is the flood going to stop? And so because of this, the trauma can worsen because you're realizing we're okay, but we still got work to do. Our situation has not changed. And so in this point in time is the reason we need counseling more than ever, preferably in those moments whenever there's positivity. In that moment, we see that the person essentially is positive, is constructively thinking, and is willing to accept help because we see the unity and reunion with people who they care about and love dearly. So thus here, we need to instill hope once more to ensure that, yes, we've lost our house. Yes, some of our family members passed away. Yes, who knows if things are going to go back to normal. But we still have our health. We still have each other. We're going to make it through this by God's grace. And we have somebody else supporting us. So as counselors, our focus is to make sure that the person feels listened to, validated, and we instill hope, because that'll help the recovery process. And eventually, in the next phase, the reconstruction phase, we may not have everything be the same as it was before, but we're going to rebuild. And who knows, this community may be much better than our first community. Again, going back to the point in question 1, talking about how God does these things sometimes to help us grow. Maybe this is a way God is helping us get closer to salvation, and things will get better. We just got to have faith in God. We just got to stay positive, and we got to move forward. And again, as counselors, our responsibility is making sure that the client has the support and has hope to keep moving forward and not allow themselves to have negativity that could ultimately cause damages to their mental health and suicide. It is our job as counselors to make sure the client has support and has hope, good faith, and feels listened and validated, because that ultimately is going to lead to the installation of positivity and hope that will let them live a happier life moving forward. So for anybody who's counseling, I do wish you the best of luck. Continue helping other people, continue transforming people's lives, and giving them support. You got this. So you have a great afternoon, and thank you for your time.